evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How is everyone doing? Well, I don't have to give instructions because we have already worked out what is happening. We have had one train trip so far from the Sands Complex. And you're now viewing the second one, which will be happening. And they will be brought here. And this part of it will commence, the formal part. So thank you for coming. Hope you enjoy it. And do enjoy the videos, please. Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just from getting officially started. We are just giving the guests a chance to arrive, and really I'm here thinking that I'm hearing you all thinking that you all should have been there enjoying that as well. It was only a contribution of $20, so next year I'm hoping they'll have it, and then you can all be a part of it. And just for information, snacks are available, only a contribution of $25. And I'm told you'll find them under the tent in that corner, just on the left of the screen if you're watching it. And indeed, I'm hoping that you're enjoying the nice jazz music as well. So you could get up and do a little dance, no problem. And the ladies, if you need a partner, once you get the appropriate permissions, I'll make myself available. Good evening once more, ladies and gentlemen. We're just going to give the tourists, the local tourists, an opportunity to get with us and be seated. And we will commence officially immediately thereafter. Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. May I please invite you to stand as we will now have the national anthem.
O land of beauty, our country where peace abounds, thy children stand free on the strength of will and love, with good in all schools, Saint Kitts and Nevis. A nation bound together with a common destiny. As towers we stand for justice and liberty, with wisdom and truth. We will serve and honor thee. No sword, no spear can conquer, for God will sure defend. His blessing shall forever to posterity extend.
I'll ask you to remain standing for a little bit as we now get into the invocation, which will be done by Mr. Vince Gomes, a member of the National Heroes Park.
Let us pray. Most merciful and heavenly Father, we want to give you thanks for today. This is one of the days that you have made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. We want to give thanks for today, our National Heroes Day, where we celebrate our national heroes and the commitment that they made to put St. Kitts and Nevis forward. As we gather here this evening, we are merging the commemoration of our national heroes along with our history, our heritage, and our culture. And we hope that this marriage this evening will give us a clearer insight as to what these brave and courageous gentlemen fought for that we know today as we call the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis. Heavenly Father, we invoke your presence here this evening, and we ask that everything that may be said and done will be done to the honor and glory of your name. These mercies we ask in no other name but yours. And the congregation says, amen.
You may be seated, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Vince. And I'll put in a little plug early for Vince. The St. Christopher National Trust, they opened a little museum just this morning, and Vince is operating the museum, so you can go and check him at the back. Dr. Marcus Natter, Cabinet Secretary in the federal government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Mr. Kevin Taylor, the President of the St. Christopher National Trust. Mr. Val Henry, representative of the Honorable His Excellency Sir Alphonse Kennedy Simmonds, National Hero. Dr. the Honorable Janice Daniel Hodge, Member of Parliament in the Nevis Island Administration, representative for our National Hero, the Right Excellent Sir Simeon Daniel. Miss Mahalia Hodge France, granddaughter of Sir Joseph N. France, National Hero, His Excellency Sir Joseph N. France. Mr. Rostrom Southwell, who will be with us, or who is with us virtually. We have to maximize the technology. And he's the son of the national hero, the Right Excellent Sir Caleb Paul Southwell, national hero. And it's a case of saving the best for last. Miss Etsu Bradshaw Keynes, Chief Executive of the St. Christopher National Trust, and who is also representing His Excellency, the Right Excellent Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw, first national hero of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Mr. Kevin Taylor and the other members of the St. Christopher National Trust. Ladies, gentlemen, children, invited guests, good evening. This is a formal ceremony, but we couldn't really be light and enjoy ourselves and relax. We don't have to be so stiff. This is a very auspicious occasion, and I'm humbled to have been asked by the St. Christopher National Trust to be the MC of this inaugural event. It is indeed a pleasure and a distinction, and I'm honored to have been done so. It's the first event of its kind, and I'm told that once the board members approve, it will happen again and again. So we're hoping that the board members who are present will actually get around to that and give the green light. I am Troy Biff Mills from SP Where the Best Be. That was meant to lively up the place. And in case you don't know where SP Where the Best Be is, that is the town of Sandy Point. Now, I'm hoping that we're going to have some fun tonight. I'm hoping that you don't expect any jokes, because that is really not one of my strengths. So we want to keep the program going, and we are going to be getting right into that. And feel free to relax. And at this stage, I remind you that there are some light refreshments on sale, only $25. It's really a contribution. So please don't hesitate. We're now going to have the president of the St. Christopher National Trust, Mr. Kevin Taylor, who's going to be coming and giving some brief remarks. Could you please welcome Mr. Taylor with a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen?
Good evening, everyone. First, Sir Mills, please allow me to adopt the protocol that is so ably established. But it is important for me to recognize a few members. We have the Cabinet Secretary, Dr. the Honorable Marcus Nato. I recognize my Executive Director, Ms. Etsu Bradshaw Keynes. I recognize other directors, Ms. Patricia Walters. I recognize Ms. Janet Archibald, and I recognize Mr. Larry Harmony and his wife. And I also recognize our Fire Chief, Mr. Rommel Williams. Good evening again, everyone. It is both an honor and a privilege to extend a warm welcome to you this evening on behalf of the Board of Directors and the Planning Committee of the St. Christopher National Trust. We are truly delighted that you have joined us for this special event dubbed Legacy of the Nation. Far too long, we have not paused often enough to pay fitting tribute to those who have sacrifices, vision, determination, paved their way for us, the people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Tonight, we gather not only to remember them, but to celebrate the courage and resilience that brought us from dependency into independence. and allow us to chart our own course as a sovereign nation. I can assure you that before the evening is end, each of us will leave with a deeper appreciation of what it truly took to shape the destiny of our beloved Federation. We will gain greater knowledge, insight, inspiration from the stories, memories, and legacies shared tonight. So I encourage you to sit back, reflect, and enjoy the journey down memory lane, a journey that reminds us of who we are, where we came from, and the shoulders upon which we stand. Again, welcome, and let us celebrate the legacy of our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Quite a few of us may very well be familiar with our national heroes, but it is critically important that the youngsters, they know about them, because tomorrow we are not going to be here. So could you give the children who are present a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, and the parents for bringing them? Very well said, Mr. Taylor. The work that our national heroes would have done, that would have been responsible for us being present. We're going to roll right along, ladies and gentlemen. The Right Excellent and Right Honorable Sir Kennedy Alphonse Simmonds, the only living national hero that we have today, and we are grateful to have him here. Mr. Val Henry, I'm going to invite you to tell us all about him. We may know the political side, but we're going to hear perhaps something on the lighter moment that we may not have known about the Right Excellent and Right Honorable. Would you please welcome Mr. Val Henry, ladies and gentlemen, with a lusty round of applause.
We have to wait until the chief has passed. Good evening, everyone. Before I go into the presentation and to tell the story, since you asked for a light moment, before coming here, maybe about an hour ago or so, I jokingly asked Sir Kennedy, "You sure you can't make it?" So he asked me, How old will I be? I said, 89. He said, how many events I had today? I said, 2. He said, well, you really think me, who about 7 months away from 90, can have a third and may get home at 10 o'clock tonight and get up for an event tomorrow? What do you think of me? Still a spring chicken? And he often likes to tell me, when I said to him, well, this is what we are planning. And in the next 5 years, and he would say, stop. And I would say sometimes in the next 10 years, and he would say, stop. And he would ask again, how old am I? And I would say, 89. So in 10 years' time, how old would I be? And I would go, 99. So he would say to me, unless you're telling me things about tomorrow, which is my future, don't come with any long-term planning. Because I don't know when I'm going to slip on a banana peel. I pray to God that for a very long time to come still, there will only be 4 reeds in front of us. I pray to God for that. And he reminds me of that too, that there are only 4 reeds at Heroes Park each Heroes Day, because I am still with you. And he's very proud. You cannot say national hero. He would stop you and say, only living national hero. Let me enjoy it while I can. On his behalf, Etsu and the management of the National Trust, Sir Kennedy has asked me to again extend his apologies for his unavailability for this evening. And even me, who was present at the other events that he was today, to be honest, I'm very fatigued. And which is why I got here on the dot of 7 this evening. But he also said to me weeks ago when first approached that he thought that this event, I'm going to try to say it in diplomatic language, is a very important event for education, for learning, and for legacy, and for the continuity of the work that was done by all national leaders of St. Kitts and Nevis. And apart from the time, he really wished that he could have been here this evening. It is said that a hero is simply an ordinary person doing extraordinary things. If this definition is indeed accurate, then I can understand why Dr. Kennedy Simmonds is a national hero of St. Kitts and Nevis. Not only did he do extraordinary things, he transformed an entire country. Allow me, therefore, to share some nuggets of his life and achievements. The young Kennedy Simmonds grew up, he likes to say, and to remind me, and he's never ashamed, on the dirt road of Rosemary Lane in the town of Bradshaw, St. Kitts, where he was born at home on the 12th of April, 1936. Kennedy Alphonse Simmonds had no ambitions to be a politician, premier, prime minister, nor national hero. His only dream was to become a medical doctor, and not just a medical doctor, but one, as he would often tell me, working in St. Kitts and Nevis. He also had a passion for sports, such as cricket, football, netball, baseball. I know about the baseball because when I worked at ZIZ, I spent many hours making sure that ZIZ would broadcast baseball games, much of which he would have enjoyed. But he also loved tennis, which he still plays today. But he also had a love for music, the arts, and he appeared in several theatrical plays at the Wesley Methodist Church and also at his school. A little unknown fun fact about Sir Kennedy is that he played the piano for the assembly at the grammar school and also for the Wesley Methodist primary school in terms of Sunday school. Interestingly, Simmons played cricket and captained the renowned cricket club. He also played for a C.A. Paul Southwell cricket team, which toured Dominica, and he also played for the Keon team in the Rural League. Though he often tells me that his ambition was to be a medical doctor, I jokingly tell him sometimes he had an eye on being a cricketer for the West Indies team. As an adult, Kennedy Simmons served as vice president of the St. Kitts Netball Association, including the periods when we won the Caribbean Netball Championships in 1973 and in 1978. It was actually Kennedy Simmonds who liaised with then Premier Robert Bradshaw to organize a special charter to fly our champion netball team home to a hero's welcome. He was the one, when he was living at Boone Avenue, next to the Dr. William Comler Primary School, who liaised along with Lloyd Lazar and others to organize all that was necessary to get the team here on time. For most of his formative years, Kennedy Simmonds lived with his aunt Rebecca and grandmother in the family home on Rosemary Lane, which today is used as a medical office for his brother, Dr. Leroy Richardson. Of course, the original house on Noggs, another fact he likes to share, has since been upgraded. His mother, Bronte Clark, had migrated to Aruba to pursue better employment opportunities. And his father, too, was working overseas during the nurturing years of the young Kennedy. He once told me that the day that he was about to see his father in a state where he can recognize him when he was growing, but still pretty young, he didn't sleep the night before, and he awaited the arrival of the boat at the ferry terminal right in front of what is now the National Trust, eagerly awaiting the arrival of his father, who was visiting. It is a memory that he says he cherishes. Life had its challenges, but these did not dampen the spirits of Kennedy and his childhood friends who played football on the street with a breadfruit or any substitute they could find. Life was not easy. It included many hours of helping with the pounding of stones in their backyard for use in the upgrading of the family home reconstruction. And he likes to tell me, life was not easy. I slept on lodgings, and I'm not ashamed or embarrassed about it. The Bradshaw Boys' School under headmaster Mr. Beach was his center of early learning, while the Methodist Church on the same street gave him his spiritual foundation. At age 9, Kennedy became the youngest person ever to enter high school in St. Kitts and Nevis. In 1954, at age 18, his academic achievements were crowned when he was declared the Leeward Islands State Scholar. This helped to occasion the fulfillment of his dream of becoming a medical doctor, which happened in 1962. It is worth repeating that there was no goal he had set for himself to be his country's last premier and his country's first prime minister of an independent St. Kitts and Nevis. Never did Simmons aspire to be a national hero of his country. He simply wanted to provide the best health care for his people. And it is a good thing, because unfortunately, when Premier Robert Bradshaw fell ill, it turned to the same Kennedy Simmons, now a medical doctor, to administer one of the most important procedures to facilitate the much-needed operation. He reminds me that when he was approached by the medical staff, Bradshaw, to do the procedure, to check with Robert Bradshaw if it was okay for Kennedy Simmons to perform the procedure, immediately Robert said, most definitely. But you see, sometimes life channels its own course. And it was by chance that Kennedy Simmons found himself in politics by carrying one end of the lead banner of the now famous Electricity March on the 19th of December 1964 against what they considered to have been the unfair policies of the government of the day. Leadership was also not on his mind when he attended the formation meeting of the Church Street in 1965 of what eventually became the People's Action Movement, PAM, on the 15th of January. Though he hid in the background, leaning to the wall, Simmons still found himself being plunged into the leadership as secretary of the emerging party and one of the signatories to the official letter to the administrator and premier, informing them on the 19th of January 1965 of the establishment of a new political force in the territory. Never did he imagine that 10 years later, in 1975, he would become the second leader of the People's Action Movement, PAM. Today, Dr. Kennedy Alphonse Simmons is hailed as the founding father of modern St. Kitts and Nevis and holds a distinguished place in the annals of Caribbean political history. As the political leader of the People's Action Movement from 1975 to 2000, and the first Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, he transformed the struggling political organization, PAM, into a dominant force and led the Twin Island nation through a period of remarkable change and development. The massive defeat, however, of the PAM in 1975 general elections demoralized the PAM party under the leadership then of Dr. William Valentine Billy Herbert. It was the movement's worst political hour. But after founder and President Billy Herbert decided to pass the baton to Dr. Simmons, he revitalized PAM, turning its fortunes around within 4 years. He had spent 15 years in opposition, but eventually also served 15 years in government, contesting general elections in 1966, 71, 75, 79, 1980, 84, 89, 1993, and 95, and 2000. In 1979, he secured the party's first seat in St. Kitts, though they had won seats in Nevis and Anguilla in the elections of 1966 and 1971. The by-election victory in 1979, after the death of Robert Bradshaw in 1978, marked a turning point in PAM's political trajectory. Though he won the election, he was denied the opportunity of being sworn in to the legislature by Premier Leal Moore, who refused to convene a meeting for over 9 months. But the death in 1979 of Paul Southwell meant that Moore had to either call a second by-election or go to a general election. He gambled his chances and chose general elections and lost the government 1 year later. Therefore, by 1980, under his astute leadership, PAM ascended to government, initiating a 15-year period of political dominance from 1980 to 95. This young Rosemary Lane boy rose from his humbled circumstances to become his country's first prime minister in 1983 at the age of 47. Immediately after taking office, Kennedy was able to build a partnership of trust and mutual respect with another national hero, the late Simeon Daniel, thus preventing the destruction and separation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Simmons went on to be successful at the polls in 1984, 89, and again in 1993. For the importance of history, he reminds, it is possible that St. Kitts could have gained independence at some time, and Nevis too could have gained independence at some time. But were it not for the cooperation and trust and support between Daniel and Simmons, St. Kitts and Nevis would have not been an independent country together. Dr. Simmons strategically attracted young voters, notably lowering the voters' age from 21 to 18, introducing continuous voter registration, which expanded democratic participation and strengthened the party's support base. Previously, registration took place on one day of the year, and you had to be at the age of 21 in order to vote. Dr. Simmons' most significant achievement, he likes to remind, during his 15-year tenure was unquestionably his success in leading St. Kitts and Nevis into independence on September 19, 1983. This landmark accomplishment set him apart from previous premiers who had not been able to achieve this milestone. As the architect of independence, Dr. Simmons laid the foundation for a sovereign nation, fostering a sense of pride and self-determination amongst citizens. At the independence constitutional talks in London in 1982, former Premier of Nevis and now national hero Dr. Simeon Daniel boldly stated, "We shall all have to face the future of our two islands together, whether as one nation or two." Simmons ensured that we did face the future as one nation. All this strife was averted by the political brilliance of Simmons with the support of Daniel. And this excellence of political craftsmanship eventually created an economic revival never seen before in the territory. Dr. Simmons' vision for economic transformation reshaped the country's economic landscape. His administration initiated several major infrastructural projects and innovative programs, including the Port Santa Cruz facility, establishing the foundation for a thriving cruise and shopping tourism industry. I often tell him that I thought he was a madman when he was boasting that he's going to create a new part of St. Kitts with Port Zante. I had no vision that we would turn all of that seawater into land, which is now Port Zante. He reminds me often, do not discount my vision. Southeast Peninsula Road, which we have now called the Kennedy Simmons Highway, opened up economic opportunities and linked key areas of the country, creating a new gateway to progress. His detractors in politics called his plan then a road to nowhere. Many had failed to see the vision, but look at the Southeast Peninsula today. It has become the future of our tourism growth and development, and even opened a new, faster, and shorter sea bridge between the two sister islands. The Citizenship by Investment Program, with the guidance of the first PAM president, Billy Herbert, Simmons in 1984 pioneered the world's first CBI program, which remains a vital economic driver for the nation to this day. The creation of the Development Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis provided critical financial support to small businesses and individuals. Under his leadership, the St. Kitts and Nevis that we know today flourished, achieving recognition as a country in Latin America and the Caribbean with the highest level of per capita income and growth. Dr. Simmons was a progressive leader who implemented policies that fundamentally improved the lives of the people, especially the poor and vulnerable. His administration introduced groundbreaking social reforms, including paid maternity leave for mothers, something that countries like the United States are still talking about for the future. He introduced a student education and learning fund, SELF, to assist underprivileged students. Fun fact, though it is included in his book, out of courtesy and respect, he did not disclose the motivation for the SELF program, but he has allowed me to share. The SELF program that we know today was created because one day a mother came to his office on Church Street and told him about the challenges of her son. She told him her son was a very bright boy, but she did not have the necessary resources to help his advancement in school. Simmonds took the decision to assist that mother and that son. But he also said, if there is this challenge by this one student, there must be others out there in need of support. And he created the Student Education and Learning Fund, SELF. That young little bright boy grew up to be one day the Speaker of the National Assembly of St. Kitts and Nevis, and today serves as the Permanent Secretary of Health, Mr. Curtis Martin. A national school feeding program was also introduced by the Simmons administration to support the nutritional needs of children. The establishment of a nationwide network of early childhood education centers, which attracted delegations from other Caribbean countries to study and emulate, was also another feather. His administration, led by the efforts of the late Sidney Earl Morris, founded the College of Further Education, which is now renamed as the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, CFBC, as well as the construction of several primary and secondary schools. His administration enacted a law allowing children of unwed mothers to bear their fathers' surnames, which did not exist before. His administration also abolished the discriminatory policies that penalize unmarried women working in the civil service. Before Pam came to office and Simmons, unwed female mothers were terminated from their jobs when they became pregnant, part of the legacy of colonialism. These reforms significantly advanced education, gender equality, and social welfare in the nation. More importantly, these were programs that, up to today, are benefiting the poorest of the poor. Dr. Kennedy Simmons' tenure as Prime Minister was marked by visionary leadership, economic innovation, and social progress. He not only led the country into independence, but also built a foundation for sustained growth and prosperity. His contributions to governance, education, and social equity remain a testament to his unwavering commitment to the development of St. Kitts and Nevis. Kennedy Simmons is married to Mary Matthew Simmons, now Lady Simmons, and father of Pauline, Michael, Kennedy Jr., Kenrick, and Keris. He's now retired from both politics and medicine. He was knighted on the 16th of September 2004 by Queen Elizabeth. In September 2015, he was awarded the honor of National Hero of St. Kitts and Nevis. As the only living national hero, Dr. Simmons' legacy continues to inspire future generations. There is no doubt that Dr. the Right Excellent and Right Honorable Sir Kennedy A. Simmons is the true father of independence of this beloved nation called St. Kitts and Nevis. May God continue to provide him with good health and more productive years in life. God bless the father of our independence and the pioneer of modern St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. the Right Excellent and Right Honorable Sir Kennedy Alphonse Simmons. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maynard. What we're going to do now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have the cowboys and Indians. They are going to escort Mr. Henry down to the picture of the Right Honorable Right Excellency Dr. Sir Kennedy Simmons. Just escort him, and then they'll accompany him back to his seat. Could you give the St. Peter's Cowboys and Indians a round of applause, and also Mr. Maynard for Mr. Henry for his contribution. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Give them a round of applause again. If I did know better, I might have thought that Val is afraid of the cowboys and Indians. Before we bring on our next speaker, Sir Kennedy, as a small boy, I remember him, but from teething away to listen cricket when he was giving commentary. So those were my first experiences with him. And to be honest, right now, well, the time is gone, but I don't know if Val could have probably encouraged him to come out of retirement to represent us at the St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots level, maybe for next season, and even for the West Indies. Give Mr. Val Henry a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. The representative for our fifth and only living national hero, the Right Excellent and Right Honorable Sir Kennedy Alphonse Simmonds. We are moving on to number 2, ladies and gentlemen. We are a federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. So obviously we can't have St. Kitts and not have Nevis. We are now going to invite Dr. the Honorable Janice Daniel Hodge, and she will be escorted to the podium as well. And she is representing the Right Excellent Sir Simeon Daniel out of Nevis. And we are now having Valens Masquerade escorting Dr. the Honorable Jacinth Martin, and she will again also give her presentation from the podium. Give me Janelle Hodge. Janice, I should have really go to school when my mother sent me rather than runway.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. Allow me to adopt the protocol that has been so ably established. And let me say at the onset, if it were not for Etsu Bradshaw Keynes and my late father, I would not be here in St. Kitts this evening. I, however, do appreciate the opportunity to be here to speak on his behalf. Notwithstanding what you would have heard before, I was told that this is a light evening. We would want to hear something that most people may not be aware of, and keep it to about 10 minutes. And so as most ladies do, we follow instructions. And let me start by saying that my late father, most of you would know him as one of the founding members of the Nevis Reformation Party. And the NRP really came into force in 1970, right after the sinking of the Christina. It was not just because of the sinking of the Christina, but because of many years of struggles that would have culminated on that day. And so as we reflect on Sir Simeon Daniel, we always associate him with trying to represent the people of Nevis to help them to overcome the struggles that they would have been experienced. Now, you would know that his mantra was really secession at all costs. And maybe it was important that that was his mantra, because right after independence in 1983 and up to 1992, when he left politics, Nevis was transformed. He was indeed called the father of modern Nevis. And when we look at the landscape of Nevis today, many of what we see can be attributed to those 9 years and the quest to be self-reliant in the quest for secession. The showers of blessing, if it doesn't get too hard, I'll continue. the quest for secession saw the Bank of Nevis being established. We saw the Four Seasons Resort coming to Nevis. We saw the Nevis Sixth Form College. And all of this was done because it was considered important that if Nevis was going to pursue secession, we needed to have our educational base in place, we needed to have financial institution, and we needed to have a payday for the people of Nevis. And so while some, and I know that I'm in Sinkits, while some may have some concerns about even the mentioning of the name of secession, I think it provided a solid foundation for Nevis to be where it is today. Education was very important to my father. And not only did he develop the necessary facilities in Nevis for education, it was something that he instilled in his children as well. And so all of his children would have been afforded the opportunity to go to college. Some pursued, and some decided that was not for them. He also believed very strongly in land ownership. And I can recall, after completing my master's degree, he called and he said he sent a package for me. And I was excited because usually his packages is a little ching-ching. But he figured that I had finished college, I started working. And when I opened the envelope, it was papers from the bank to pay for lands that he went ahead and made the down payment, but gave me the responsibility. I was not very happy at the time. I just finished college, started working, enjoying money, and now I had to be sending monies back to Nevis to pay for the land. I say that because he did not just preach certain things, he practiced it as well. And so his children today are very much living based on his teachings. Now, in terms of the light moments, I can remember driving around with him through the streets of Charlestown and in the villages, and he was a very humble person. He would stop and he would speak with everyone, fishers, farmers, teachers, nurses. He had a special relationship with fishermen. And ultimately, I got to realize that that relationship was because he loved fish so much. He tried to partner with some fishermen to help them to get boats and fish wire so that he can get fish in abundance. But you know what they say about partnerships? And so he did not get the fish that he thought he would get. Then he started to farm fish. And so he had a pond where he was growing tilapia. Unfortunately, the pond was quite some distance from his home. And many other persons got to the pond before he could. So he did not benefit from that either. Then he started to grow fish in a tank at home. But at that time, it was not because he really wanted to eat the fish. He got so attached that it was more like a hobby for him. Notwithstanding, fish was one of his favorite dishes, especially steamed fish. And on many occasions, he would cook the fish himself, and he would invite friends over. And once they had the fish, steamed fish and green bananas was one of his favorite. And then there's some persons who would come by and cook fungi. And so you can imagine steamed fish and fungi. It wasn't too long after you would hear dominoes pounding and a jolly good time. It was at those sessions that we got to know a lot about our father and Simeon Daniel and what he was really about. we understood that for him, there was a quote that he usually says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." And so he would oftentimes leave himself undone so that he can help others. It was not necessarily my favorite trait, because oftentimes he would leave me undone to help others. And he would say, "You understand, they need it more than you." Growing up, my siblings and I, we experienced a lot of sacrifices because it was not easy to perform at the level and to be in touch with the people that he needed to be without sacrificing some of his family time with us. However, I can say that his family is extremely proud of his accomplishments. We are extremely proud of what he would have instilled in us. And I'm extra happy that when my older sister and my older brother asked, "What do you want us to become?" He said, "I want you, the son, to be a lawyer, and I want you, the daughter, to be a doctor." And when it was my turn, I said, "Daddy, what do you want me to be?" And he said, "You can be whatever you want to be." I was heartbroken, very much so at the time, because I felt he did not really care about giving me direction. Later on in life, I realized that giving me that freedom to be whatever I wanted to be was probably the best thing that he could have done for me. And having spent all of those years growing up around him, understanding his love for Nevis, his love for people, I sometimes wonder if he knew that I was going to walk in his footsteps as a politician. Not for fame and fortune, but because of the struggles of the people that we see. And we grew up understanding that we must help others. I will close by saying, my father would have, as Washington Archibald would have said, blinked for a moment. And his quest for secession was put on the back burners. He would tell you that he never gave up the quest for secession. But he understood what it means to put country above self. And he did what he thought was in the best interests of the country when he joined the coalition with the PAM party back in 1980. By 1983, our country became independent, but he still felt, and I know that he died with a heavy heart, knowing that Nevis never did realize its full potential to be able to control its own destiny. And I don't think that I need to make a clarification on his behalf, because while he would have started with the quest for secession, he ended up wanting Nevis to be able to determine its own destiny, to minimize reliance on external sources. External sources, even if within the same country and in St. Kitts. And so for him, there is still work to be done in order for us to fulfill that dream for him so that Nevis can be self-reliant and determine its own destiny. Thank you for the opportunity, and I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you so very much.
Ladies, give it up for Dr. Daniel, and she's going to be escorted for a photo op. Down by the picture of Daniel. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. the Honorable Jacinth Daniel Hodge, Member of Parliament in the Nevis Island Assembly, representing her dad, our national hero, the late Right Excellent Sir Simeon Daniel. Before we move on to our next rep, just a reminder that the activity on Friday, I know a lot of us won't be missing that. That is the Independence Ceremonial Parade. It happens at Warner Park on Friday at 6 p.m. So we now move on, ladies and gentlemen. And we are going to be inviting the great-granddaughter of His Right Excellency, the late Sir Joseph Nathaniel Daniel, France. I just wanted to make sure that you folks are not asleep on me. I'm hoping I'm not being too boring. So we're going to invite Miss Mahalia Hodge France, who will be delivering her remarks, and she'll be escorted by the St. Peter's Bull.
And the children who represent the future of this beloved nation. It is with deep pride and humility that I stand before you as we honor the life and legacy of our national heroes. I greet you not just as an audience, but as a family bound by the history we share. Today, I speak as the great-grandchild of a man whose sacrifices and vision still live in the heartbeat of our nation. Sir Joseph Nathaniel France, KCMG, CEB, NH, was born in Mount Lily, Nevis on September 16, 1907. He grew up knowing the hardships his parents endured. At age 13, he had reached the highest level of education offered then. His father, Thomas France, a sharecropper, knew that his last son, Joseph, was destined for something bigger than the limited opportunities that existed at the time. So when young Joe expressed a desire to cross the waters, his father had no objections. Eager to further his education and explore new horizons, Joe France set sail for St. Kitts to live with his sister, Mrs. Christina Ward. He worked as an office boy with the St. Kitts Nevis Universal Benevolent Association while attending night classes. It was there at the UBA that he aligned himself with those already engaged in the struggle for better working and living conditions for workers. He began his career as a printer and journalist at the Union Messenger, the forerunner of the Labour Spokesman, and eventually became its editor. Comrade France recognized that the masses needed a voice through which to expose the evils of the plantation system. The Labour Spokesman therefore became the mouthpiece of the masses. Comrade France has been at the helm of every progressive movement that emerged to look after the poor, landless, and dispossessed people in this country. He was among those who agitated for an increase in the wages of field laborers, which sparked the Buckley's Riot of 1935. He stood with the masses during those turbulent times. Again, he was at the forefront in the fight for adult suffrage, when finally in 1952, workers earned the right to vote. Workers' League, which later became the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party, was birthed out of a fervent desire to ease the oppression of the working class. In 1938, Comrade France was elected as secretary and held that position unopposed until 1993. He was also elected Secretary General of the Trades and Labor Union formed in 1940 and held that position until the time of his passing in 1997. His unwavering passion was for the betterment of workers in this country, and he devoted his entire life towards achieving that. He was the proverbial iron fist in the velvet glove when he negotiated for higher wages, better working and living conditions for the ordinary man. His mantra was to leave St. Kitts and Nevis better than he met it, and he did just that. Sir Joseph Nathaniel France holds the distinction of being the longest serving parliamentarian in the English-speaking Caribbean. He successfully contested 9 general elections from 1946 to 1989 as the Labour candidate for West Bastia and had landslide victories every time. In the West, there was absolutely no contest. Uncle Joe, as he was affectionately called, was a mentor to his relatives and especially the youth in his constituency. He encouraged them to seek every opportunity to educate themselves, to become self-sufficient, and never be afraid of taking risks. He believed that education was the gateway out of poverty. His house became the launching pad for several relatives who ventured off to the United Kingdom and the United States in search of a better life. What many persons may not know, Sir Joseph was an accomplished musician and writer, having received training through correspondence courses from prestigious music schools and writing institutions in the United Kingdom and the United States. He was one of a team who provided music at the Apollo Cinema in the days of silent movies. He was also a regular contributor to the Mutual Improvement Society newsletter. Not much of a talker, he expressed himself best through his writing and music. However, as he became more involved with his work as a trade unionist and politician, he put his two loves on the back burner, and sadly, they remained there. A former Minister of Education, Health and Social Services, he was recognized for his sterling contribution in 1967 when the Joseph N. France General Hospital was named in his honor. In 1969, Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, conferred on Sir Joseph the distinguished title of Most Distinguished Order of Knight Commander of St. Michael and St. George. A hero, a stalwart, a champion of the masses, Sir Joseph passed to the great beyond on May 21st, 1997, 4 months short of his 90th birthday. Tonight, I am proud to honor Sir Joseph Nathaniel France, whose humility is legendary, whose life was a tenure of dedicated service, and whose contribution to this federation could never be ignored or erased. Thank you.
Give it up, ladies and gentlemen, for Miss Mahalia Hodge-France, the great-granddaughter of our national hero, the late Right Excellent Sir Joseph N. France. She will now be escorted by the Monkey Hill Bull for a photo op. Thank you very much, the Monkey Hill Bull. We are moving on nicely, and we're going to now have the late Right Excellency Sir Caleb Azariah Paul Southwell being honored by his son Rustum Southwell, who unfortunately isn't with us today, but he will, however, be making his presentation using technology. And we will still have the St. Peter's Explorers Bull come across and following the same, and they'll come and they'll assist here. They'll just stand behind me, playing, matching to their music. Before the presentation, okay, let's do some adjustments. Let's have them come after.
Distinguished colleagues, let me adopt the existing protocol, and also if the Prime Minister and the Cabinet members in the room want to give a special shout out to you for inviting me to do this, and in particular, Bradshaw for asking me to do this. I also want to take you back about 99 years in history. And just imagine a 13-year-old young man walking in a small peasant farming village with his imagination and hormones at its peak, and deep in thought about what the future would be like. Filled with energy and many wonderful ideas of what is next for him in the next decade or so. He's exploring the world as time and himself went by. What he didn't expect, however, was what would happen next. In an instant, his life was changed as this eerie sound was coming along the dirt road he was walking on. And as he looked up and saw the machine moving, chugging along, moving towards him at about 30 miles an hour, he immediately dove into the bushes to hide, fearing that he may be kidnapped. Such was the sighting of Paul Southwell of the first motor car as a 13-year-old boy. That experience brought him to the point where he decided that technology and the world was changing at a pace that if he's not leading or involved in it, it wouldn't change. And that was the genesis of what became the man who was known in St. Kitts and the Caribbean, and indeed some parts of the world as well. His birthday, July 18th, 1930, was exactly 5 years before Nelson Mandela. And very much like Mandela, he went into years of service for his own community. That is recorded history. The fact that on his last week on Earth in St. Lucia, the act to create the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States after the failure of the Federation in the West Indies was one of his last acts as a living soul. But his impact on St. Kitts' economy is one thing, but then there was his family. Paul Southwell, we know, was a jovial and charismatic character who spent so much of his talents on Shakespearean theatre with the Arts Festival, on the Chief Minister's Cricket 11 as a cricket commentator, as well as a musician, having played the saxophone, mandolin, guitar, and he was quite apt and oratorial in presenting himself. But at home, he was a gentleman. Having left Dominica in his teens to join the Leeward Islands Police Force and move along the Caribbean islands, he settled in Nevis when he met the love of his life, Gladys Southwell. My mother had 9 children, and she was all about sharing and selflessness, and she engendered that attitude in all of us. It is no surprise that the partnership between her and Daddy, my father, worked so well. Remember that at the tender age of only 31 in 1944, at the height of World War II, and a mere 2 days after the birth of his son, Poesy, he penned a strong poem, Take Up the Black Man's Burden, as a response to Rudyard Kipling's 1899 poem, as an ode to the white community. And Daddy's response was a message to his young son to do the work and lift up the Black community and that race as a effort to make sure that the economy and the participation of Black communities was strong. This meant that in all that he did, he had the people first and education as one of the tenets. If you recall, he was with Marcus Garvey as the MIS in the 1930s and 40s when he visited St. Kitts. And the mantra of each one, teach one, was always part of it. From him, he gave us a legacy. His legacy to us, his children, was simple, that there was only one way to do things, and that is the right way. And for me, I sat at the feet of this transformational leader who took an agricultural economy and created an economic strategy and vision designed to create a successful governance model for a flourishing, healthy economy, which is now benefiting St. Kitts. But he was not one who would not be part of fun. And even his cricket team, the Chief Minister's 11, had members of all parties on it. I recall Fitzroy Bryant, the late Fitzroy Bryant being there, but also the late Billy Herbert as well played it. And I think Dr. Simmons played as well. And people like Len Harris and Deming were members of that team. And he really enjoyed that sport and the networking that entailed. For us as children, he was a strong disciplinarian who insisted that we get a strong education and of all respect ourselves and respect others. The Arts Festival was a creation that we know that he enjoyed, but even in our own home, on Sunday mornings before he head to the beach with Mr. Harley and others, he would stop and have the family sit and minister to us prayer. It was that touching way that you remember Daddy and his comfort and pleasure. Even after Mother and him had 7 children, he snuck her off almost like they were eloping for marriage in the countryside with some of his close friends. He was always dear and genuine, and he was a man for the moment. I recall one of the proudest moments he had was in the late 1960s with the sports day at the grammar school, when our late sister Clio was the Victrix Ladorum, that's the top female athlete, and Pixie and Clytie were the two gold and silver medalists on the high jump. And I recall at the end of that day, him packing the kids in the car and driving down 4th Street, tooting his horn. His smile was infectious. His love and his deep voice, his love of people, his love of St. Kitts and Nevis, and that whole community was commendable. And even for me, because I played cricket where my brothers played soccer, he always reminded me that it was mostly Sargent, because my uncle Livingston and the late Manasseh were top cricketers. And even though Poesy, Rebop, and Shakespeare were good football players, he actually reminded me of that. The love for Daddy and Daddy's love for country will go on in our hearts. I'm happy that we've made another anniversary of independence. I want to thank you all for inviting me to make these remarks.
of St. Kitts and Nevis. You know I was born in St. Paul's in 1916 to William Bradshaw and Mary Jane Francis. But no, I was not Robert Bradshaw. At that time, I was Robert Francis and later acquired my last name of Bradshaw as an adult by deed poll. You know that I came from humble beginnings, that I labored in the cane fields. I labored in the cane fields, and that I rose to become a union leader, a statesman, and ultimately the father of the nation. But tonight, my daughter Etsu lends me her voice so that you may hear not just what you already know, but what you may not know about me. You know that I was the only child of my mother, Mary Jane. However, when she migrated to provide for me, I was raised by her mother, my grandmother, and my aunt. You may know me as a man of principle and determination, but you may not know how much of that came from my mother's quiet strength. She never had riches, but she taught me that a man is measured not by what he owns, but by what he is prepared to endure for what is right. It was their faith, their endurance, and their gentle guidance that gave me courage to stand with the workers in the cane fields, to speak out when injustice prevailed, and to dream of a nation that belonged to its people. You know of my public battles for workers' rights and independence. But you may not know the private man behind them. I had a family who gave me joy and grounded me. I had 2 children, Etsu, my daughter, with Clementine from Nevis, and Isis with my wife, Mildred. Later, I was blessed to see the laughter and love of my first grandchild, Jermaine, who spent my last days with me. And later, 4 grandchildren, Aisha, Jendai, Araminta, and Carla, and 4 great-grandchildren, Jamik, Audrina, Abigail, and Abraham. Each a reminder that love and legacy are inseparable. Leadership is not without its trials. In 1967, there was an attempted coup against the government. I stood firm, committed to the rule of law, yet determined to protect the people's right to democracy. It was a tense time for all of us, and I remember the weight of every decision. I had to act decisively, yet justice was not on my side. Then came the tragedy of the Christina disaster. I saw the destruction, the lives lost, the despair in the eyes of mothers and fathers, and I cried. I was not ashamed to cry because my heart was with the people. Leadership is not only about laws and policies. It is about feeling the pain of your nation and carrying it forward with action. You may know that our federation included Anguilla and Nevis, but you may not know the challenges I faced in uniting the islands. There were misunderstandings, tensions, and even resistance. I dealt with these with patience, dialogue, and the firm belief that the islands could coexist peacefully, respecting each community's identity while building a common future. And yes, there were times when false accusations were made against me. Some claimed I made statements, claims that were fabricated, unsubstantiated, and deeply unfair. I never responded with anger, but with truth, with continued service, and with actions that showed my dedication to all people of the Federation. You may know that I valued progress, but what you may not know is that how deeply I believed in education. I said then, and I say again today, ignorance is the greatest chain that binds a people. Education is the key that unlocks the door of opportunity. Every school we built, every child who learned to read, felt to me like a victory greater than any political triumph. Knowledge was freedom, and freedom was the dream I carried for every citizen. I once told our people, we are not beggars on this earth. We are men and women of worth. The dignity of labor is the foundation of our freedom. And of course, my greatest dream was the independence of our nation, though I did not live to see it fully realized in 1983. Every step I took through labor struggles, federation negotiations, and uniting our islands was to prepare the ground for St. Kitts and Nevis to stand proudly as a free and sovereign nation. We do not seek independence for its own sake. We seek it so that every man, woman, and child can live with dignity and pride. It was the culmination of a lifetime of service, struggle, and vision, a dream I entrusted to those who would follow me. I believe that a nation is strongest when its people understand their rights, their history, and their power. I reminded our citizens, freedom is not given, freedom is earned, and it is the responsibility of each generation to protect it and pass it on. And that is exactly what I hope to leave for you, a sense of responsibility, dignity, and pride. So tonight, as my daughter lends me her voice, I want you to hear me not only as a statesman, but as a man, a son, a brother, a father, a husband, a grandfather. I made mistakes and I carried burdens, but I always gave my best because I believed in the promise of this nation and its people. Remember me not only in statues or books, but in the choices you make. Remember me when you choose courage over fear, service over self, unity over division. Remember me in the laughter of your children, in the dignity of your labor, and in the pride of your nation. For my story is not finished. It continues in you.
ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it a little more energy. That was Etsu Bradshaw, Kane's daughter of our first national hero, Right Excellence Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw. And she's also the executive director of the St. Christopher Nevis National Trust, and the St. Peter's Clowns accompanied her. That's the end of the presentations for the national heroes, ladies and gentlemen. And we are getting there smoothly. Could you give all the presenters a round of applause? I guarantee all of us learned something that we didn't know. We're now going to have a virtual greeting with music, multimedia, and folk heritage. This will be done by Mr. Al Soulful Sad Keynes. And you may not know, he wrote and sang the first independence song in 1983. And 10 years later, in 1993, he and his son, they wrote and performed a 10-year anniversary song. So could you please give it up, ladies and gentlemen, for Al Soulful Keynes, as he'll come to us via the technology. Forgive me, I didn't hear the round of applause.
It gives me great joy and pride to greet you on this very special occasion as our beloved Federation celebrates 42 years of independence. 42 years ago, when we stood at the dawn of nationhood, I was blessed with the honor of writing and singing the very first independence song, Have a Joyful Independence. It was my humble contribution to a new chapter in our country's history, an anthem of celebration, pride, and hope. My own journey began long before that historic night when I first took to the stage as a singer with the Val Morris Orchestra. Those early days taught me discipline, the joy of music, and the power of lifting people's spirit. I will forever be grateful to Val Morris, whose guidance and encouragement shaped my path. I was proud in years past to honor him because I know that without him, Soulful Sad would not have had a voice. And as the years went by, music continued to be my gift to the Federation. When we reached the 10th anniversary of independence, I was blessed once more to write and perform another song, this time with my son, G, 3 Cheers Baby. That father and son moment was more than a performance. It was a celebration of legacy, a passing of the torch, and a reminder that the joy of independence belongs not only to one generation, but to all. Service has also been a big part of my story. Many remember me as a national who helped bring our young men and women onto the cruise ships, giving them a chance to work, to travel, and to build new lives. I look back on those years with gratitude, knowing that so many families were strengthened because doors of opportunity were opened. Service, after all, is another song we sing for our nation. As we celebrate 42 years, I must extend my deepest apologies for not being able to be with you in person tonight to perform those songs once again. Though I am absent in body, my spirit is with you, and my heart is full of congratulations for all we have achieved together as a people. As we tell the stories of our historical site and honor our ancestors, many of whom migrated in search of better lives, let us also remember to tell the stories of those who remain working quietly among us. The artists who gave their time, their gift to strengthen this nation, too often they go unnamed. Yet the impact is written into the fabric of our independence. May God continue to bless our people and this federation we proudly call home. Congratulations, and may the spirit of independence always live with us. Thank you. Good night.
Celebration in this island. It should make the
from Sons of Japan and case again. 10 years of freedom, St. Kitts people, live it up. Here it is.
3 cheers, baby, here's a toast to you, honey. Come to sing and dance, jump and prance. 3 cheers, baby, here's a toast to you, honey. Come to have some fun, right? Enjoy the sun.
Live it up.
It's been 10 years, yes, my baby,
Long
and
time.
I'll always love you, dearly. You've been always there for me.
Right there.
Sunny, fertile, caring free.
Every time.
Don't change step, you're my dove. Stole my heart, St. Kitts, my love. My love, my love, my love.
Sing it.
3 cheers, baby. Here's a toast to you, honey.
Wine.
Come to sing and dance.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and to the clowns as well, and really to Al Soulful Sad. I remember those songs, but I didn't realize our own did that. Give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And we're now going to get into we're getting there. We're almost at the end. So thank you for putting up with me. We're now going to get into some cultural and historical features. We're going to be having Miss Crystal Osborne. She'll be escorting Tony Armstrong Fredericks. Persons would know her way back when from Win FM fame. She has worked at the National Trust. If anyone knows it, it has to be Tony. So could you please give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen?
I certainly hope. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Frederick Armstrong, and I am from the village. I was born in a building that's still there. It's called Lanka Lodge, right to the top of Five Ways. Many, many, many moons ago, one fine Monday morning, as my siblings were getting ready to go to school, delivered by a nurse Tyson. Some of you all might remember Nurse Tyson. I'm just waiting for my tablet to respond. And by tablet, I mean this thing here. Okay, now, if you'll just bear with me. And if it doesn't, we good. Oh, here we go. I was going to say, if it doesn't, that's all right, because I know this story only too well. Tonight, and I really might have to show you how well I know it for true. Because after all of this, my tablet is acting up. And that is okay. Tonight, I want to take you back to 1935. If I can just beg for one moment of your time. Okay, I'll do it off my cell phone. Well, Biff, it's you and I tonight, right? I want tonight to talk about one of the turning points in our history, and that is the Buckley's riots. I want to take you back with me to 1935, right here in St. Kitts, the place, a sugar estate called Buckley's in the village. You know where it is. Most of you know where it is. You know the area. And what happened there in 1935 was not just a local disturbance. It was a turning point in the history of St. Kitts Nevis and at the time Anguilla, and indeed the Caribbean. It's a story about struggle, courage, and change. So let me set the stage for you. Life before the so-called riots, or as I and others like to call it, the uprising. I call it the Buckley's uprising. And when I talk to young people, I talk about it as an uprising. What was it like living in the 1930s as a sugar worker? The sugar industry that had dominated the island for centuries at this point was in decline, and things were really, really hard for the working classes. Poverty was widespread, wages were painfully low, families lived in squalid, dilapidated, and often overcrowded housing, no running water, and for the most part, no sanitation of any kind. And these unhealthy living conditions and the poor nutrition led to widespread disease like yaws and tuberculosis and all kinds of skin diseases, ringworm, and so on. And the situation was made worse because the medical care that was available publicly at the time was inadequate to almost non-existent. And in addition to all of this, access to education was also restricted, and where you could get access, it was kind of limited. So most people in the working classes didn't even have the opportunity to get any sort of education that could help them improve their lot. In St. Kitts, and I'm talking about St. Kitts now because that's where the uprising took place. In St. Kitts, in 1935, life expectancy was 44. Are any of you here tonight over 44 years old? A few? A handful? Well, you wouldn't have made it if you lived in 1935. Infant mortality was 1 in 4, which means that for every four births, one of those children did not make it to the toddler stage. So 100 years after emancipation, our people, the masses, the working classes, lived in worse conditions than their formerly enslaved ancestors. Because, you know, back then they were, I don't like the word, but they were property of the estate owner and who was obliged to feed them and make sure that they stayed alive. But 100 years later, you work, you can't work, you can't work. It was not the problem of the plantation owner. In most of the Caribbean at that time as well, trade unions, and of course, you know, the trade union looks out for the workers, but trade unions in the 30s were prohibited in most places like St. Kitts and Nevis and Anguilla. And where they were recognized, or where they existed, like in Trinidad, they were not legally recognized. So what this meant is that workers had no voice. Workers didn't have anybody to advocate for them. There was no organization to say, let's talk about the condition, let's talk about wages. So you have these people living, not even surviving for the most part, from hand to mouth, and no organization to advocate for them in the workplace. And to make matters worse, the government at the time, Crown Colony government, was made up not of elected representatives, but selected representatives, people who were appointed by the Crown and the governor to serve. And you know who they appointed? People from the merchant classes and the planter classes. So the people who sat in this appointed government did not represent the people. And they didn't really have the plight of the workers at heart at all. It was against this backdrop that we saw the tensions that led to the infamous Buckley's uprising, because you had people who lived, their back was against the wall and they had nowhere to turn. They had no government to look out for them. They had no unions to speak up for them. And so this was the atmosphere in the 1930s. And the build-up to Buckley's actually began in December. Before Buckley's was in the January. But in the December of 1934, on these estates owned by the Wade family, where they refer to it as Wade's estate, but they actually own several estates, Dewars and Douglases and so on. But on the Wade's estate, workers were given their Christmas bonus of 8 shillings a ton. Other estates gave 3, and some estates gave none. So things are bad in most places. And tensions were bubbling because the word was out that bonuses were either not going to happen or they would be lower than anticipated. In January of 1935, you began to see cane fires breaking out in Bastille. And those of us who have been around a little longer know that that was one way that workers could express their dissatisfaction. When you saw cane fires, many a time they had been started deliberately as a way of stopping the crop, as a way of disrupting the sugar process, as a way of saying we're not happy and we really have no other recourse. On the 20th of January 1935, and I know Miss Hodge, France Hodge, spoke about the UBA, the Universal Benevolent Society. They actually had a meeting, and the secretary of that meeting told the workers, point blank, the wages aren't going to increase. Okay? The price of cane was not going up. Wages are not going to increase. And many of the workers felt betrayed. There actually was murmurings among them, that the executive of the UBA was bribed, and they were not happy. Thomas Manchester, who we all know, and I won't have time to talk too much about him tonight, but he, of course, was one of the advocates for workers' rights, and he actually tried to appeal to the estate owners, please try to give something, but fell on deaf ears. Anger was simmering. And then the spark. Buckley's, 28th of January, 1935. The workers were demanding wages of 1 shilling per ton, and the manager at the time, E.D.B. Dobbridge, refused. And there was a bit of tension, a bit of confrontation, which ended in the workers throwing down their tools and walking off the estate compound. Most of you all know how it played out. They marched to Shadwell. They convinced workers there to join them. By noon, you had about 300 or 400 people gathering and walking around the island. They reached to Brighton's, where carts were disabled and mules were unharnessed. Workers, as I said, wanted to stop the crop, stop production, disrupt it. By the time they reached Lodge, the owner there, Philip Todd was his name, he confronted them with a shotgun, and he was beaten. And that was a big deal. You know, for them to turn, for the people to take things into their hands and beat an estate owner was a big deal. I believe this is one of the reasons why Britain sat up and started to pay attention to what was happening in the islands. That's just my opinion. That's not in the history books. They broke his gun. At Willets, the overseer was forced to hand over his tools so that they could disable the carts. And eventually armed police came in and they arrested some of the leaders, but the marches continued. And the escalation continued the next day. Very few people turned up for work anywhere. And the large crowds moved west, swelling in numbers as they went. And at Sadler's, a laborer was actually beaten for refusing to join. No, we don't know the motivations, but there would have been people who, for whatever reason, were afraid, were afraid to, or were reluctant, or, don't want to rock the boat. But they were pressured because the marchers, the protesters, they were really riled up and they were upset. And, it had started. What's the expression? The gate, the gate had opened, the horse was out, right? Can't rein it in, no. And at West Farm, workers were also forced to stop working. And by 3 p.m., and this is the following day, hundreds of them had reached back to town at Buckley's, where the manager, Dobbridge, fired his shotgun and wounded several of the demonstrators. And the crowd was angry. And the police arrived, and the strikers demanded that Dobbridge be arrested. That evening, you had respected leaders like Mr. Manchester and so on trying to calm the protesters down. Victor John. I'm sure Mr. France would have played a role there. And some left, but many stayed behind. Again, it was too late to rein in that anger. So the Defense Force and the Defense Reserve were now armed with live ammunition, because that wasn't really something that was usual. And they were sent to Buckley's at 6 o'clock that night. And the riot act was read. Stones flew. And soldiers started pushing the crowd out into the main road, pushing them out. And finally, at around 7 p.m., shots were fired into the crowd. 3 men were killed. 8 were wounded. By 9:30 p.m., the island was quiet, but the damage was done. The aftermath of that, in the early hours of the 30th, armed reinforcements arrived from Antigua aboard the Lady Nelson. And you know what? More cane fields burned. They weren't going to be silenced so easily. On the 31st, the warship, the HMS Leander, arrived, a symbol of how seriously Britain was taking what had begun as just a wage protest. And the violence that erupted in 1935, it wasn't on the agenda of the Workers' League. The Workers' League with Thomas Manchester, they had been advocating for better conditions. But they understood the underlying cause of the riots, and the leaders were sympathetic. And they actually provided a means for some of the more visible protesters to get away, to Stacia, Sabre, St. Bart's, and they assisted others with legal representation in the trials that followed. They also realized that the frustration which had caused the outburst had to find a vent, an escape through more structured and disciplined protest. So Thomas Manchester's solution, eventually, because believe me, the changes did not happen right away, was the formation of a union. So once unions were legally recognized in St. Kitts and Nevis, he asked his cousin Edgar Challenger to set up a union, which as you know, became the St. Kitts and Nevis Trades and Labor Union, and that was founded in 1940. Now, why did all of this matter? Today, despite how Biff introduced me, I'm back to my first love and what I returned to St. Kitts and Nevis to do, which is to teach history. And this is what I teach my children. Why did Buckley's matter? Because, Buckley's was actually one in a series of disturbances that took place across the region in the 1930s. And it was really a turning point. What came out of Buckley's itself? Did the workers instantly get better work conditions and higher pay? No, sadly, those who were involved most likely didn't even see that in their lifetime. But the uprising set in motion something much bigger. And to calm the unrest, Britain did what Britain does best. They call a commission. Let's discuss this. Let's look into this. And so they formed a commission of inquiry in 1938. So we're talking already 3 years later. And to their credit, it included trade unionists and labor representatives. The Moyne Commission, it was called. And it was headed by a man by the name of Lord Moyne. And they acknowledged first and foremost that the people needed a greater role in government. I mean, it stopped short of saying, let's give everybody the right to vote without any qualifications or prerequisites. But they recognized that that's where they needed to go, and they recommended that the qualifications to vote be gradually reduced. What was happening at that time is, in order to vote, you had to have a certain amount of property and land and so on, which immediately locked out the working classes because they didn't have what you needed to be able to vote. So they didn't have a say. By the way, at this point, remember, they're starting to say we need to have more elected members in the House. But who could vote? And the way things were set up, it wasn't the masses. And they recognized that that change was needed. And so the riots proved that the system that had been in place could not continue as it was. And so that was one of their major recommendations, recognizing that people needed to have a say. Probably, in my mind, one of the most, if not the most significant recommendation was the realization that we needed trade unions, and not just trade unions, strong trade unions. So they recommended that trade unions be legalized, recognized, and strengthened, to the point where they even recommended that leaders be sent overseas to get, learn about negotiating skills and that sort of thing. They understood that had unions been there, you wouldn't have had these, well, you may have, but you were less likely to have these spontaneous outbursts and this unrest that really, because of its spontaneity, didn't really have a plan. But if you had a structure in place that could allow for the grievances to be addressed, you could avoid the disorder and you could actually get things done. And so through that, we got in St. Kitts and Nevis, finally, legalization of trade unions. And for the first time, the Black working class in St. Kitts, Nevis, and Anguilla had a legal collective voice. And those unions fought for higher wages, better hours, safer conditions, and they continued the push for universal adult suffrage. They continued the push to get rid of all the requirements to vote. So as long as you're an adult, you could vote. And that was part of the legacy of the unions, that they continued to push for that. And it was the beginning of, as well, of organized political life in St. Kitts and Nevis, and actually the Caribbean, because political parties grew out of the trade unions or grew up alongside the trade unions. And the trade unions base provided support and supporters of the political parties and so on. And then when you were looking for leaders to be in the political parties, say, well, what about that guy Bradshaw? We believe in him. We trust him. We trust Mr. France. These are guys that we should be putting to run for us in elections. And through that, and through Britain making the necessary constitutional changes gradually to increase the number of elected representatives in government, we began to see our own gradually taking control, taking the reins of power in local government. And so, by 1938, both West Indians and the British government knew that the old colonial system had to give way to what we were saying, more representation. And the protests of the 1930s, including the Buckley's Uprising, told the same story, that Crown colony government had failed. It had failed to connect with the people. It had failed to relieve distress. It had failed to prevent disorder. The people of the Caribbean were no longer satisfied to let the moneyed classes speak on their behalf. And for the first time, working classes themselves were demanding recognition. It was a sociological watershed, a point of no return. The trade unions and the political parties, born out of the unrest, pushed the colonies towards more and more self-government. And eventually, after a bold but unfortunately failed experiment to federate all the colonies into one, to move together to independence as a bloc, each moved to independence by themselves, one at a time, with us and Kitts and Nevis being the last so far, there's still a couple left, to do so. And so we look at the legacy of Buckley's and those brave souls at Buckley's. And when we talk about the Buckley's Uprising, we're not just talking about broken fences or a few days of violence. We're talking about the moment when ordinary men and women, armed with nothing but their voices and their determination, forced the authorities to take notice. And from that point forward, the path was set. The lives of future generations, our lives, were forever changed by the courage of those sugar workers in 1935. The workers who stood up at Buckley's were not fighting for glory. They were fighting to feed their families. They were fighting to live with dignity. And their actions remind us that ordinary people standing together can change the course of history. From their hardship was born hope, and from their struggle came those first steps toward freedom. And the spark that struck at Buckley's lit a flame of justice and dignity, a flame that still burns in the story of St. Kitts and Nevis today. Thank you.
let us do a much better job than that, ladies and gentlemen. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I would probably have to get the permission of Mr. Armstrong to have Tony share a bit more with us. We're going to break the little talking right now, and we're going to have a quick performance of the St. Peter's actors, a curtailed version. Could you welcome the St. Peter's actors, ladies and gentlemen? ladies and gentlemen, for the St. Peter's actors and children, please don't practice this at home. This is extremely dangerous. You could get seriously hurt. Please, please, these gentlemen have been practicing for years. Please don't try this in any way, size, shape, or fashion. We're going to move along, ladies and gentlemen. In everything we expect expansion and growth. A few years ago, we would have had the St. Christopher Heritage Society. However, that has developed into the St. Christopher National Trust. We're going to have Crystal Harmony and Larry Harmony. Jackie Harmony, just wanting to make sure that you guys with me still. We're going to finish shortly, I assure you. Jackie Harmony, where she will be telling us as the founding member of the St. Christopher Heritage Society, that transition to where we are today. Could you please give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen?
Good evening, everybody. I want to adopt the protocol that has been established by the speakers before me. I was not sure how to prepare for this because I wasn't sure who was going to be here. So, lovely to see all of you this evening, and welcome. Oh, Lord. I'm so shaky here. Excuse me. Come. You want a face? Right. I am honored to be present here this evening. Really am. And I'm to give a brief overview of how the St. Christopher Heritage Society evolved into what we have seen here tonight, the St. Christopher National Trust in action. It all began 36 years ago when the St. Christopher Heritage Society was formed. Initial meetings were held at the public library. Thanks to the invitation of Vanta Archibald, the chief librarian. At those meetings, oh my, a lot of this technology thing is really something else. I'm going to have to work with, I apologize for this. Thanks to the invitation of Vanta Archibald, we were able to meet at the public library. At the meeting, she, along with Rita Cable, who is here tonight, Viola Jacobs, Larry Harmony, and myself, met over the concern for the apparent absence of the awareness in the general population of the history and heritage of our island nation. All of us, teachers in one capacity or another. Now, this was 36 years ago, not today. All of us, teachers in one capacity or another, recognize that there seemed to be a dearth of information about the evolution of our country. we understood from our own personal experiences that there were books and other documents that existed overseas and in private libraries, but they were not available to locally or accessible to students, teachers, and the public. And decisions were being made at all levels that did not seem to take into account our history, culture, and environment. We lamented the fact that there was no institution on island to address these needs. Those documents that had been saved from the devastating fire at the courthouse and public library in 1982, and where the National Archives had been stored, were in total disarray after what remained was relocated to the new government headquarters on Church Street. The public library itself did not have in its collection sufficient material for research. There was no museum in St. Kitts at the time, apart from the one at Brimstone Hill that focused on the military aspect of our colonization, and the one in Nevis that focused on Alexander Hamilton, that could present to the public in some palatable form the story of the evolution of the people and society of our federation. These were the driving concerns in mind, therefore. And it was decided to form an organization that would focus on these things. And it came to be named the St. Christopher Heritage Society. Meetings to inform the public and to encourage interested persons to be part of the move to create such an organization were held at the University of the West Indies extramural campus in St. Kitts. It was there on July the 11th, 1989, that the Heritage Society formally came into being, and Jacqueline Harmony, yours truly, was elected its first president. Vanta Archibald and Crichton Pension vice presidents, Larry Harmony, honorary secretary, Wentworth Rogers, honorary treasurer, Victor Williams and Rita Cable, member representatives. Later, the Honorable Tapley Seaton, Attorney General at the time, was appointed the government representative on the Council of Management. From its very inception, the Heritage Society was a non-governmental membership organization, one that grew rapidly because of the voluntary efforts of the members it attracted and the interests of the general public and business community. The firm of TDC was approached for office space and provided the organization its first home, one room that grew over the years to occupy the whole of the first floor of its building on the corner of Bank and West Square Streets. With local, region, and even international support and recognition for the work it was doing, the Heritage Society grew to become an important historical, cultural, and environmental non-governmental organization in the Federation. It was invited to participate in local regional workshops and conferences, decision-making and policy formulation fora. The exposure and experience that its members and staff received became critical to its expansion, influence, and direction over the years. During a meeting with the newly appointed Minister of Tourism, Culture, and Environment, Honorable Dwyer Astafal in 1995, it was proposed by the then President Victor Williams that the partially destroyed and abandoned landmark historic Treasury building should be restored and become the home of the Heritage Society and the site of a national museum. A memorandum of understanding was signed between the two parties in 1999, and the government retained ownership of the building and responsibility for its maintenance. The Heritage Society would locate its operations and take responsibility for overseeing restoration work and establishing a national museum. In late 2000, with minimal repairs made to the building for the holding of events of Carifesta, the Heritage Society moved into the west wing on the ground floor. The building had previously housed the General Post Office and other government departments, all of which had to be relocated because of the serious structural damage caused by poor maintenance and the ravages of a series of hurricanes passing between 1989 and 1999. Volunteer engineers David Keith and David Rollinson oversaw the restoration work, which was undertaken by Gordon Pemberton, a local contractor. Funds were sought locally through donations, overseas grants, and governmental input. It took several years for the building to become operational. By that time, the Heritage Society collection of documents and artifacts had grown considerably, and a documentation center and reading room were formally established in the office. Exhibitions were mounted when the restored ground floor east wing was completed in 2002, and in 2005, the National Museum opened its doors to the public on the second floor. The government subvention, which began in 1995, increased as the operations and exhibitions of the society and museum expanded. The argument was made that the Heritage Society was carrying out several of the functions that normally would be undertaken by a government. And as a non-governmental organization itself, had access to funds and expertise that was not readily available to government agencies. The organization had grown and a professional staff had to be hired if it was to undertake and promote projects of national interest. The documentation served not only the general public, especially students, but also government departments. The voluntary nature of its members was critical, as was the financial and other contributions it attracted. The building and the presence of the National Museum within it served not only the residents of the country, but was a major part of the tourism product and visitor experience. The prime location as the gateway to historic Bastia from the newly completed cruise ship port, Port Zante, was fortuitous. After extensive deliberations, the idea of the Heritage Society evolving into a national trust began to take shape and gain traction. It was felt as a trust, given the examples in other countries. The organization had greater status, outreach, and impact at home and abroad, and attracted the much-needed finance and expertise for its further development. with the support of the then Minister of Sport, Culture, and Tourism, the Honorable Richard Skerritt, the expertise of former Attorney General Tapley Seaton, then Vice President and member in his own right of the Heritage Society, and the input of the government representative, Attorney Karen Hughes, legislation was drafted. The St. Christopher National Trust Bill had its first reading in the House of Assembly in 2005, but it was not until 2009 that the act was finally passed. The transition was relatively painless, as all the physical and other assets, including the membership, were transferred from the St. Christopher Heritage Society to the St. Christopher National Trust. The original Council of Management was renamed a board to include representatives of relevant government ministries and a wider membership representation. The government subvention was increased. The individuals and institutions involved in the creation and development of these organizations are too numerous to detail given the time that has been allotted me for this presentation. But it would be remiss of me not to mention a few. The TDC group of companies was fundamentally important to the initial and subsequent efforts and sustainability of the St. Christopher Heritage Society. The Island Resources Foundation, a regional NGO, environmental NGO, headquartered in USVI, provided physical and institutional guidance in the early years, and Mukti Fund, a private foundation out of the USA, headed by Michael Dively, provided funding for physical resources, staff training, and financial support, not only to the Heritage Society, but to other community groups. Once established, there is no doubt that the federal government became an important player in the evolution and development of the organization through its subvention and financial contribution to the restoration of the old Treasury building. The membership that grew significantly and provided the base for much of the success of the institution through its voluntary input cannot be minimized. Excuse me, I have to drink something. My voice is going. It is true to say that the St. Christopher National Trust, indeed as it has been demonstrated tonight, can continue to make a significant contribution to national development and the creation of a sustainable island state. If carefully managed and supported by the national community. Its guiding principle, our heritage belongs to all of us, has sustained its work and actions throughout its existence, from its evolution as the St. Christopher Heritage Society to the present St. Christopher National Trust. May its work continue to bear fruit well into the future. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Could you give it up again for, this is Jackie Harmony, founder, one of the founders of the St. Christopher Heritage Society. And there again, ladies and gentlemen, we had some serious history. We are getting there. We're now down to the Spooner's Cotton Ginnery. A lot of us don't know about that. And we are going to invite Miss Destiny Harvey to tell us about this. And she comes as part of the program of the St. Christopher National Trust, exercising and practicing inclusivity, having other entities be a part of it, partnering with them. And we invite you to come on board and partner, become members. Give her a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening, everyone. As a result of a courthouse fire, little archival evidence remains to tell the early history of Spooner's estate until additional research and an archaeological investigation of the grounds can be completed. It can only be assumed that life on the estate in the 18th century mirrored that of other sugar plantations in St. Kitts. During this time, an estate of 100 acres was considered large, although by 1724, growers in Antigua, Montserrat, Nevis, and St. Kitts were harvesting wild cotton for export to England. Sugar had already become the primary export commodity. Cotton tended to be grown on smaller subsistence farms. A surviving map drawn in 1753 indicates Spooner's estate by name and that an animal-driven sugar mill was in operation. No other mention of the estate occurs until 1848, when records show that the estate had come into the ownership of Benjamin Buck Green. A merchant and ship owner Green also owned 7 other estates on the island, some of which he leased to smaller operators. The introduction of steam-powered sugar mills in the Caribbean came about after the British Parliament in 1874 abolished all sugar duties. By 1880, sugar consumption and thus the demand in England had increased 4-fold. Records held by Fletcher and Company of England show that parts for a steam engine and sugar processing equipment, such as aspinal pans, pumps, and a new boiler, were shipped to a Spooner's estate between 1874 and 1909. The chimney that still stands on the property and is connected to the old mill works by way of an underground brick flue was erected in 1878. The 2-story stone building that housed the sugar mill and later became part of the cotton ginnery is almost identical in design to other steam-powered sugar mills in St. Kitts dating to this period. It is believed that the mill at Spooner's estate served as one of several central mills on the island, and like the other central mills, processed cane to neighboring plantations as well as from the estate. During the 1870s, the 2-story great house with its beautiful stone stairway, vaulted front porch, and commanding views of the surrounding fields was constructed on the rise directly above the sugar mill. The renewed activity of the Caribbean sugar industry in the 1870s and 1880s did not last. By 1,900 exports had fallen and efforts were underway on both sides of the Atlantic to find a replacement crop. In 1900, Sandal and Wade, owners of an estate in Montserrat, purchased Spooner's estate and mill works and soon began experimenting with the cultivation of cotton. At this time, a severe cotton shortage was occurring in the southern United States. The British Cotton Growing Association was formed in England to promote the growing of cotton in English possessions where other crops had failed. The first trial plots were sown in St. Lucia in 1901. In St. Kitts, Sandal and Wade planted 20 acres. This first crop, ginned by hand, yielded 2,689 pounds of lint. Following the success of this experiment, Sendall and Wade expanded the cotton crop on the estate, introduced it to their estate in Montserrat, and installed a small steam-powered ginnery, including 2 gins and a baling press at Spooner's. The cultivation of cotton quickly gained momentum throughout the Caribbean. Improved methods and cottonseed made available to growers at cost quickly improved the quality of the crop, which caused demand to increase in the English market. Growers, in turn, expanded their acreage in cotton. From 1902 to 1903, the amount of land in cotton in the West Indies rose from 400 to 4,000 acres. By the 1907 to 1908 growing season, the acreage had increased to 20,000. Statistics presented in a 1916 West Indian Cotton Growers Conference show that from 1912 to 1914, St. Kitts and Nevis produced an export crop valued at 45,813 pounds. This represented 24.3% of the total cotton produced in the West Indies. The First World War bolstered the market. In 1917, the British government, paying substantial prices, purchased the entire West Indian cotton crop to manufacture cloth to cover the wood frames of military aircraft. After the war, considerable speculation kept prices high, causing a glut in the market. This eventually drove prices for lint below production costs. At the same time, production costs, including costly control of the pink bollworm, made it impossible for growers to return a profit even when prices were 50% above pre-war levels. Despite these difficulties, the ginnery at Spooner's estate remained in operation. In 1939, after a fire on the estate, the existing prefab corrugated metal ginnery building was put up and new ginning equipment installed to replace the original ginnery. About the same time, the manager's house was constructed partially over the remains of the original animal-driven sugar mill. At some point shortly before Sendall and Wade purchased the estate, or perhaps sometime after, the great house above the ginnery stopped serving as a residence and was used to store ginnery pads. The new ginnery continued to operate and to employ local workers until the early 1970s. In 1973, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, as part of its nationalization of agricultural land, purchased the estate and the ginnery. Today, only 1.8 acres containing the Great House, the Manager's House, the 18th century mill ruins, the 19th century mill building, and the 1939 ginnery building and equipment remain as a government holding. Because the ginnery shut its doors only 20 years ago, the machinery, although no longer operable, has survived in reasonably good condition. Spooner's estate is also the only ginnery remaining in St. Kitts. For these reasons, coupled with its location and accessibility and the commanding views from its grounds, Spooner's estate is considered a valuable part of the national heritage. Significant opportunities are present to reuse the site cost-effectively as part of St. Kitts' growing tourism industry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Destiny. And Destiny comes to us from the Ministry of Sustainable Development, and it's all a part of the inclusiveness of the St. Christopher National Trust. We're down to the final presenter, ladies and gentlemen. By no means the least. We have been hearing about these things from since we were little children, but we're now going to have Mr. Greg Pereira of Greg Safaris and Tours tell us about the Meridian petroglyphs. Could you give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen?
Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here, and especially to be invited by Etsu to talk about the pre-colonial petroglyphs that we have at Stone Fort Ravine, also called Bloody River Canyon. Let's not forget, these proud and free people were here for 2,000 years prior to European colonization, so they're very much a part of our foundation as an independent nation. It's a real honor for me to be here to talk about them. And my journey started with really thanks to Stanley Franks, and Dwight Astafan back in 2000 with Carrie Festa, being asked to spearhead the Indigenous people's activities for Carrie Festa. So it was a real honor for me to do that, being asked by them. Boy, the memories are unforgettable, truly special being there at that time. So the petroglyphs at Stone Fort Ravine, hopefully we'll see some on the screen in a while. But let me start my little spiel here. And by the way, it's a real honor to follow such greats as we've had tonight with Tony and Jackie and others. And of course, Ed Sue's spiel at the foot of Mr. Bradshaw was quite moving, and I really enjoyed the way you did that. And of course, the message that came with it. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and fellow citizens of the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis, today, as we gather to celebrate the 42nd anniversary of our political independence from the United Kingdom, we also honor the rich history and cultural legacy of our islands. It is a day to reflect on our journey as a proud and free people, ensuring that we remember those who came before us, whose stories and spirits continue to shape our identity. At the heart of this celebration lies the acknowledgement of the Aboriginal peoples who inhabited these islands long before our nation was born. This legacy is woven into the very fabric of our culture. You saw tonight with presentations very much influenced by the Amerindian history of St. Kitts. So this legacy is very much woven into the very fabric of our culture. And today I want to take a moment to spotlight a remarkable testament to their existence, the petroglyphs found on the canyon walls of Stone Fort Ravine near Challengers Village. Have you all been there? You got to go see it. It's really spectacular, okay? These rock carvings of Indian petroglyphs represent not just art, but a window into the spiritual and everyday lives of our island's ancestors. Dating these petroglyphs poses challenges. Methods of dating are often indirect, relying on associations with nearby archaeological sites and stylistic comparisons. Yet, experts like Dr. Ivan Rouse, a pioneer in Caribbean archaeology, suggest that the complexity of these carvings can give us clues about their origins. More advanced images depicting what might be wedding scenes or shamanic rituals are often interpreted as being more recent, while simpler representations such as airless faces are believed to be older. What is particularly fascinating is that this petroglyph site at Stone Fort Ravine consists of a mix of styles, hinting at a shared cultural space across different different eras. This speaks to the continuity of our people's history, where generations have interacted with these sacred surfaces, leaving their mark for those who would come after them. The meanings behind these petroglyphs remain elusive, but they're often viewed through a ritualistic lens. Many of these carvings display exaggerated features, blending the human with the animal in a dynamic narrative. They may have served as boundary markers, pilgrimage sites, or even portals to another world. As noted by Garrick Mallory, these petroglyphs are not just curiosities, they are intellectual remnants of ancient inhabitants, offering insights into the evolution of the human mind. To truly appreciate these rock carvings, we must engage with them in a way that honors their complexity. For example, the direction they face, the texture of the rock wall they were carved into, and the way figures interact with one another all tell a story that transcends time. These carvings are not mere decorations, they are the echoes of our ancestors, inviting us to ponder their beliefs and experiences. Moreover, the practice of ancestor worship was integral to the spiritual life of the Caribbean Amerindians. The elongated figures found on rock faces are believed to represent spirit ancestors wrapped in their burial hammocks. Such interpretations remind us that our connections to the past are profound, and the legacy of our ancestors is alive in our hearts and minds. As we commemorate our proud nation's National Heroes Day today, let us pledge to preserve and celebrate the cultural heritage that defines us as a nation. The petroglyphs of Stone Fort Ravine are not just relics of the past. They're a call to honor our roots and recognize the resilience of spirit of the Aboriginal peoples who first called these islands home. In closing, let us continue to explore our shared history, embrace our cultural diversity, and ensure that the stories inscribed on the rocks of our homeland are not forgotten. May we take pride in our heritage and strive to protect the legacy of those who came before us. As we stand here today, let us remember that our freedom is built upon a foundation of rich history, and it is our responsibility to carry that forward into the future. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Greg. And once more, very, very powerful history. And those of us who haven't visited these sites as yet, we'll need to do that shortly. We're getting there, ladies and gentlemen. We just have 1, 2, 3. I'm only kidding. We now, we now have the vote of thanks, ladies and gentlemen. And that is going to be done by Mr. Vickel, the president of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College Student Government Association, Vickel Edwards Douglas. And I don't need to say he's from Sandy Point, but give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Master of Ceremonies, if still applicable, please kindly permit me the opportunity to adopt the protocol which has been so ably established, which has set the tone for this dignified ceremony this evening. On behalf of the St. Christopher National Trust, I rise with deep humility and profound gratitude to extend heartfelt thanks to all who have made this legacy of the nation ceremony a success. First and foremost, we lift our thanks to Almighty God, whose guiding hand has blessed this day with wisdom, strength, and purpose. Without His grace, none of this would have been possible. We extend our sincere appreciation to the Cabinet Secretary and the Independence 42 Committee for their steadfast support and partnership. Your dedication has ensured that our nation's heritage continues to be honored and dignified through its vision. A special word of thanks to the Honorable Richard Skerritt, who so masterfully guided us on the Sugar City train ride tour this evening. We also acknowledge Mr. Adiel Shiverton and Mr. Sherlock Queeley of the Sugar City train ride, whose efforts created a memorable and seamless experience. To the management of the Sugars Complex, thank you for your generosity in allowing our guests to park and participate with ease. To all the individuals who purchased tickets to take the tour, your presence and contribution are invaluable to this celebration. We are grateful to Mr. Vince Gums for grounding us in prayer at the National Heroes Park, and to President Mr. Kevin Taylor for his warm and thoughtful welcome. The very heart of today's ceremony, the honoring of our national heroes, has been both moving and inspiring. We express our profound gratitude to Mr. Val Henry for his presentation on the Right Excellent Right Honorable Sir Kennedy A. Simmonds, to the Honorable Janice Daniel Hodge for honoring her father, the Right Honorable Sir Simeon Daniel, to Vera Edwards France for her tribute to her grandfather, the Right Honorable Sir Joseph N. France, to Rustam Southwell for remembering his father, the Right Honorable Sir Caleb A. Paul Southwell, and to Mrs. Estu Bradshaw Keynes for her touching tribute to her father, the Right Honorable Sir Robert L. Bradshaw. Put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen. To the families and friends of our national heroes, thank you for sharing their lives, their legacies, and their light with us. Our cultural expressions were enriched by the folklore groups, the cowboys and Indians, the masquerade, the bull, the clowns, the actors, and the artistry of Mr. Aidan Hendrickson. We say a heartfelt thank you to Mr. Al Soulful Sad Keynes for adding his signature voice to this celebration. We acknowledge with deep gratitude the invaluable contributions of our historians and storytellers, Miss Tony Frederick, Miss Destiny Harvey, Miss Jackie Amri, and Mr. Greg Pereira, who helped to weave our past into today's narrative. We are also grateful to Miss Crystal Osborne for her careful coordination and support of these voices of history. Special recognition must be given to Mr. Zeke Percival and his staff, including the security and grounds team of the National Heroes Park, whose stewardship ensured that this sacred space was both safe and welcoming. We thank Miss Marcia Jeffords, our co-producer, and Chameleon Media for their stunning video and graphics that helped to bring the vision alive. To Mr. Loftus Bridgewater and his team for his mastery of lighting, thank you for painting our evening with brilliance. To our executive director, Mrs. Estu Bradshaw Keynes, the producer of this ceremony, we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude. Your leadership, creativity, and dedication are the heartbeat of this memorable occasion. Alongside you, Miss Rodina Griffin, and the dedicated staff of the St. Christopher National Trust, thank you for your tireless work behind the scenes. We also recognize the Board of Directors of the St. Christopher National Trust for hosting this remarkable event, affirming their commitment to preserving and promoting our shared heritage. To Pontines of Grill and Chill, thank you for nourishing us with snacks, and to Joan, whose care and attention kept our environment neat and dignified. We deeply appreciate you. We extend our gratitude to our masters of ceremonies, Mr. Troy Biff Mills, whose voice carried us smoothly to each moment. To the media team, your coverage ensures that the spirit of today will echo far beyond these grounds. And finally, to you, our audience, your presence is the truest validation of the vision behind the legacy of the nation. You are the living custodians of history, and your encouragement and engagement ensures that the stories of our past continue to inspire generations yet unborn. As we close, let us leave here not only with gratitude, but with a renewed sense of purpose to protect, preserve, and promote the legacy of this great nation. Thank you, and may God continue to bless St. Christopher and Nevis.
Thank you very much, Vikel. And ladies and gentlemen, we're now at the end of it. I hope you did enjoy it. And I think Ms. Esther Bradshaw and the St. Christopher National Trust deserve a round of applause again. Give them a round of applause. I am campaigning. I'm in election mode. I'm campaigning to have the event, make it an annual event. I'm hoping the board of directors are still here. And as we leave, ladies and gentlemen, please be safe, get home safely, and always be positive in your thoughts, your words, and in your actions. Have a good night, and thank you for being here. Yes. Oh, thanks a lot, man. Oh, that is good. Oh, yes. Well, I guess you guys really, I might have been so hungry.
It should make my people happy to join in unity as we jam, sing and dance for this all.